is what he said to Adam, sometimes called the Adamic covenant. Right there as they come out of Eden, Genesis 3:15, he said, a deliverer is going to come. And that goes on and on and on, down through the ages. That covenant holds. There is coming a deliverer born of the woman who shall smash the head of the serpent, the Adamic covenant. Then you come to the Noachic, or covenant with Noah. Could call it the covenant of preservation. God said he's going to preserve the human race, going to preserve them until the deliverer comes. Seed time and harvest, heat and cold is going to continue. He won't again flood the earth. Even though the hearts of men are rotten and corrupt, he's not going to judge them until the deliverer comes, because only the deliverer can change their heart. And the deliverer now, he said, will come through Shem. That was the son of Noah. So we know from Adam it will be for the human race the deliverer will come. Now we're narrowed down. Through Shem he will come. One member of Shem's family was Abraham. And to him was given the Abrahamic covenant. And there shall be a descendant from him. And that covenant goes right on to the end, waiting for that one. So they all pick up on each other. You follow what I mean? The purpose shall be fulfilled. How? The deliverer shall come. Who is he? From the tribe of Shem. Who is he? From Abraham. So they all pick up on each other and they build and build. Now suddenly here, okay, all the other covenants, they're going past me now. They're all going along. They're all doing their thing. They're all rushing on to be fulfilled in Jesus. Now suddenly, we've got something else. This is different. So the thing that they're going on this line. Here's another track altogether. What we're about to look at, the Sinai covenant. I want you to know the Sinai covenant could in no way stop the Abrahamic covenant and the Adamic covenant. They go on untouched. God doesn't contradict himself. We have here, you might say, a parenthesis. If here is Mount Sinai when the covenant was given, and we'll say here is when Jesus came. Here is where all the others were fulfilled. Here is where the Sinai one stops. It's over. It had something to do in here that we're going to try and show you. But it doesn't interrupt these. Now, some of you are nodding wisely. Others of you are looking at me cross-eyed. I said I'm going to say that more than once. But this time now, around and around again, and it will begin to get to you. And it will show you why so many Christians never make it in their Christian life. Because they get Sinai mixed up with the Abrahamic covenant. They get the old covenant mixed up with the new covenant, and they have an unholy mess. We've got to get this straight. And when I understand why God gave this Sinai covenant that at first sight seems to contradict everything else, and no, it doesn't contradict. The others go on to be fulfilled in Jesus. This one God puts in for a special purpose. So they come now to Mount Sinai, and there begins the prelude, or shall we say, going back to our covenant model, that here is the discussion. Shall we enter into covenant? Now, right there, you have its first difference. Do you remember when God entered into covenant with the human race through Adam, he didn't sit down with Adam and says, now, how would you like this, Adam? What do you think of this? Good idea? Why not? He comes to Adam and Eve and says, this is the way it's going to be. Like it or hate it, this is the way it is. I will send the deliverer. A covenant is God sovereignly dealing with man. You don't negotiate. You don't have a trade union boss to go and talk to God to negotiate a contract. Like it or leave it. When God came to Abraham, there's almost a command there. He says, get up and get out of your country. Right? Again, sovereignly God comes in. And when he made the covenant, do you remember? God went through the pieces. Abraham slept in the corner. Remember that? Yeah? God bless your laugh. I see you understood that. Anybody? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. That it was a one-sided covenant. That's what I'm trying to say. Do you understand that? It's early in the morning, I know, but do you understand that? Really? It's a one-sided covenant. God says, this I will do. This is the way it is. And God was the guarantee that it would happen. So from the Garden of Eden, Jesus is going to come whether you like it or not. God said so. And he's going to come through the seed of Abraham, even though they foul up. He's going to come through the seed of Abraham. God said so. We come to Sinai, God sits down and says, you know, if you would keep my covenant, I'd do this. This is different. In the Greek language, there are two words for covenant. Now, of course, we're dealing in the Hebrew here, but the Greek is easy to understand in that. What we have been talking about in Greek is called a diatheke. A diatheke is a one-sided covenant, the initiative of God. But if two human beings or two persons come together to make an equal covenant, that is, I'll give my part and you give yours, that's called a syntheke. In Sinai, you have God saying, I'll do this, you do that. Right? Are you with me? You really get what I'm saying? This is the difference. Responsibilities put on the people. And so it is. He says there in Exodus 19, thus you shall say, we're in verse 3, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, to the people of Israel, they're the same people. That's a Hebrew way of talking. They talk in parallels. So the house of Jacob is the people of Israel, one and the same. But it's two different ways of looking at it. He says, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So he says, now there's a good reason why you should enter into covenant with me. Look what I've done for you. Look what a trustworthy, faithful God I've been. I have brought you like little baby eagles on my wings. I have brought you to this place. So if we sit down and we discuss this, really, don't you think, after all of my love and power that you have seen, don't you think it would be a good idea to enter into covenant? He goes on and says, you have seen what I did. Da, da, da. Now, therefore, now, in the light of that, if you will obey my voice, and if you will keep my covenant. See, two sides here. It's if. And if that be the case, you shall be my own possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. That is a very neat statement of covenant. My own possession, depending on your translation, the margin might say my special treasure. If you've got the King James, it's got that very neat expression, peculiar people. It doesn't mean you're weird. It's an old English way of saying special treasure, peculiar, unique. Maybe a casual translation of this would be, you shall be my pocket money. That is, I own all the money, and I decide this goes here, this goes there, this goes over there, but you are my pocket money. That is, with you I delight. My pocket money, I can keep it, I can spend it, it's mine in a way that the rest isn't. So God says, if you keep my covenant, if you're going to walk with me, then you'll be my pocket money. My special delight will be in you. And he goes on and says, you'll be my own possession, for all the earth is mine. That is, I own all people. Whether they like it or not, I own them. But if you'll keep my covenant, you'll be my special people. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Priests are those who stand in the presence of God, minister praise to God, minister offerings to God, and then do that on behalf of others. So he was saying that you shall be a priesthood, that is, you will stand on behalf of the rest of the world. And you'll minister to me, and you'll bless the rest of the world. You'll be the go-betweens, the mediators, a holy nation. That is, those set apart. Holy simply means set apart. This Bible, in that sense, is holy to Malcolm. That is, it's mine. It's not just a Bible. It's a specific Bible set apart to my use. Therefore, it's holy. Set apart in its simplest sense is being set apart to God. God, the Holy One, is set apart to himself. We, being holy, are set apart to God. And so he said, you'll be set apart to me. And so he said to Moses, these are the words you shall speak to the children of Israel. So in verse 7, Moses came, called the elders of the people, set before them all these words which the Lord commanded him. Listen, verse 8. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses reported it to the Lord. Do you see that? Abraham didn't have to sit down and say, no, I think I'll go along with that. The Israelites did. God says, you do this, I'll do that. Go and talk it over, Moses. Moses talks it over, and they said, good idea. All the Lord says we'll do. He goes back to, see, he's the mediator. He goes back to God. He says, they said yes. Okay. Do you get the picture here? And so it is that you find that in the rest of the chapter, God shows his, would you understand if I said awfulness? It's the best word I know, but it's been devalued today, so that when something's awful, it means terrible, disgusting. Our teenagers have really done a job on the word. I don't know if it's got to this part of the world. In New York, they go around saying, that's awesome, man. Well, that is disgusting use of a most beautiful word. You know, a piece of music can't be awesome, nor can an ice cream cone be awesome. Awe means to be, I am filled with awe. It's as if my heart melts inside of me. It's as if I realize that I am creature standing before my Creator. It is that I feel my mortality as I gaze upon immortality. I feel my nothingness as I gaze upon omnipotence and power. Power that has no limits. Power that is not had, but power that is, if you know what I mean. God doesn't have power, He is it. To look at that, I cringe, I tremble. That's what I would call the beautiful fear of God. If you've never been terrified of God, maybe you haven't seen Him altogether yet. You won't get this out of some of the songs that are sung, little ditties that are sung in the name of God. Talk about God like my neighbor upstairs. Or, I can sin like I please, but He'll understand it all by and by. It's okay, God's a big pal. Next door neighbor sort of stuff. Have a barbecue with him, he's my pal. God is so close, I'll agree. God is so close, He lives inside of me, He fills my home. Couldn't be closer. God is my familiar friend. But at the same time, God is awful. Do you understand what I mean? There's a beautiful terror. There's a glorious holy scare goes through our soul to see God for who He is. And God, in these verses of Exodus 19, would make sure that the people fully understood who He was. Understand this one that you so glibly say, all that the Lord says will do. Understand who it is you are entering into this covenant with. And so you have in these verses here what seems to be on first reading a rather big show over nothing. For the mountain quakes, and what seems like the sound of thunder, what looks like lightning, what is like a gray cloud on top of the mountain. Oh, so awesome. And then when you feel there couldn't be any more done, I'm scared in the presence of this awful other who's on the mountain. Then they put a fence around the mountain and says no one must even touch the mountain. Even if a dog wanders on, it will have to die. God is giving them in picture language. He's playing it out in front of them in very strong, dramatic pictures that He is God and they are creature. He's there. The life of the universe, the creator and upholder of all things. He shows Himself to them in ways they can understand. And every time you think, well, now we'll get started, He sends Moses down again and says, now make sure they understood. Until they stand in awe, which is the heart of worship before this God. And then, in chapter 20, and God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And there follows the 10 Commandments. You realize that God spoke on that occasion directly to the people. It has never been known before or since that God spoke in the Hebrew language audibly to 3 million gathered people. Can you see the picture? Here is the Mount Sinai, covered in clouds that move and roll. ever folding and enfolding themselves, out of which come flashes of lightning, and the place is shaking and the thunder. And there's a fence around the bottom of the mountain that people dare not come near, for they realize this is God. This is the life beyond the atom. This is God. And 3 million people stand there. The little children clinging to their parents. Wives holding their husbands' arms. They're standing in the presence of God. No other nation has ever done that. And out from the midst of the cloud comes the voice of God. 3 million people heard God speak in Hebrew. I brought you out of the land of bondage, out of the land of Egypt. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And so on, down through the 10 Commandments. Think about that. And in verse 18, and when all the people perceived the thunderings and lightnings and sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, stood afar off, and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will hear, but let not God speak to us lest we die. Enough is enough. They said, you don't seem to be scared of God. You've been up and down that mountain. You go. And I'll get to this in another hour, but they blew it right there. They said, we don't want to get close to God. This is getting too personal. This is too scaring. We need a mediator. If we are going to know God, we do not want to know Him immediately. You know what I mean? We'll know Him immediately. That is through a mediator. Don't ask us to stand in God's presence. We're too scared. We would rather know Him immediately through a mediator. And so it was that Moses goes up the mount. And it is that God speaks to Moses. Moses speaks to the people. And then there is given what is from chapter 21 of Exodus through chapter 24, what might be called the book of the covenant. It was given to Moses on the mount, which outlines, it is not, I'll warn you, it is not the funnest reading in the Bible. And sometimes you might wonder, what on earth does one get so excited about this for at such an awesome holy time? God takes those 10 commandments and He puts them down where the people live, saying this is how they work out in life. And at the end of that time, Moses wrote it in a book. It was called the Book of the Covenant. And again, for the second time, when the people hear it, so they heard that God would enter into covenant, they said, yes, we agree. We'll do everything God says. Then the 10 Commandments, followed by the Book of the Covenant. Moses reads it, says, do you understand? Oh, we understand. We'll do everything God says. 10 Commandments, that's a snap. We'll do that. That's easy. We'll do everything that God says. And so it was that they built an altar at the foot of the mountain. And they placed over here, so here's the altar. Over here, they built 12 pillars. So now this is symbol language. We're entering into covenant. But remember, this time, the people are as vitally involved as God is. So the altar will stand for God. Right? Are you with me? The altar is a picture, a symbol. It stands for the presence of God. The 12 pillars, they stand for the 12 tribes, families of Israel. So here it's set up symbolically. 3 million people can't go through with this. They need a representative. Well, they've got Moses as the mediator between them and God, but now the 12 pillars stand for them. In that sense, the 12 pillars are the representative. The altar is the representative of God. And they then make offerings. Blood is shed. And then it tells me that they took half of the blood that was shed and they sprinkled it on the altar. Are you following me? I don't mean just what happened. Do you see what's happening behind it? In every covenant, cut the wrist, blood all over my arm, blood in my hand. I am blooded. The covenant is with a shedding of blood, the oath taking. And the altar stands for God. So half the blood sprinkled on the altar, that is blood sprinkled on God in that sense. God takes the covenant oath. And again, the book of the covenant is read to the people. As if Moses said, guys, do you really hear this? Will you really go along with this covenant? They said, yes, all that God has said we will do. Third time. So he solemnly took the other half of the blood and he sprinkled it on the people, on the pillars. God and the people have entered into a bloody oath of covenant. God says, from now on, you will be my pocket money, my special treasure. You'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation if you keep this covenant. And the people said, we'll keep the covenant. And they swore with bloody oath. And then in chapter 24, you have one of the most amazing pictures in the Old Testament. Chapter 24 and verse 9. Then Moses and Aaron, his brother, Nadab and Abihu, leaders of the people, and 70 of the elders of Israel, here are your representatives, went up, that is up the mountain, and they saw the God of Israel. There was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief men of the people of Israel. That is, they lived in the presence of God and there was no judgment against them. They beheld God and ate and drank a covenant meal in the presence of God. The Sinai covenant was sealed and settled. The people with the blood of covenant on them. The altar representing God with the blood of the covenant. And they having sworn to keep the covenant. That covenant was repeated to their children 40 years later, and we call that repetition of the covenant the book of Deuteronomy, the second law. It's not a fresh covenant, it is simply the repetition of this one. And personally, I prefer reading Deuteronomy to reading Exodus. Deuteronomy is the funnest book of the first 5. And I'm in good company because if I go from the quotations, Jesus read Deuteronomy more than any other book. And I suggest to you that you read through the book of Deuteronomy, and there you will see the covenant spelled out. And specifically in chapter 28, you will see the blessings and the curses of the covenant. God tells them what it means then that they shall be his special people, his pocket money. And he said they'll be blessed in every way. Blessed when they're at home and blessed when they're out. Blessed in their work. He says you shall be the head and not the tail. You'll always be on top. You'll never be underneath. He said you will be known among all the peoples of the earth as my people if you keep the covenant. But if you don't keep the covenant, because this is sunthiki. So, if you don't keep the covenant, let me tell you what will happen. And just as in human covenants, the curses are brought out. And verse after verse after verse of the curses that will come upon the people. Cursed in their homes, cursed as they go out, cursed in their weather, cursed in their crops, if they don't keep the covenant. It's a tragedy that within 6 weeks of saying 3 times over with the blood of covenant on them, that they would keep all the words that God said, within 6 weeks they'd broken it. And we're dancing around an altar worshiping a golden calf. But we better stop there. That is the Sinai covenant. We'll come to our next hour and discuss what that really means now that we're beginning to see it's different to the others. God bless you.